Another common issue that you'll see with lagoons, EQ basins, and settling basins is low dissolved oxygen. So there's many ways, obviously, you can put oxygen in the water, and oxygen is a major component of wastewater treatment and has been forever. So traditionally, what most people are familiar with, and what you'll see a lot of, especially in mechanical plants, is a blower with diffused air. So that is one way that you can put air in, and another is surface aeration. And the one I'm going to specifically address today is the ProFusion by Bradley, and how it's unique in the way it puts in air. But to give you an example, compare the two. So the one that most people are familiar with is a blower. So with a blower, you'll have a high horsepower blower, usually off somewhere. It can be a couple hundred feet sometimes away from the lagoon. So you have a blower that takes air and basically pushes this air through the lines. And as it goes through these lines, you get some resistance, and so you need increased horsepower to keep pushing through lines and bends in the pipe. So as you go through and push it, once you get to the lagoon, then you have to go down into the lagoon. So let's say, for example, this basin or lagoon is 8 feet deep. You have to push air 8 feet deep, then into a membrane. So there's more than one type of diffused air. There's large bubbles and there's small bubbles. Large bubbles are great for moving water and mixing and bubbling it up. Small bubbles give you a better transfer. So if you look at, as an example for small transfer, so if you look at the bubble size, that can be key. If you have a large bubble and then small bubbles, let's say these contain the same amount of air. Obviously this big bubble will move water because it's pushing water up, and these won't move as much, but you'll get a better transfer of oxygen into the water with a smaller bubble, because the transfer takes place at this little thin line between the bubble and the water. So the more lines that you have between bubble and water, or between air and water, you get better transfer. So that being said, when you want a smaller bubble for oxygen transfer, you need a membrane, which is usually a fine membrane diffuser. So you take a diffuser, you get these little bubbles and you push them through, and it takes a lot of energy. And these little bubbles, they just rise up, and then they transfer oxygen as they go. So with the ProFusion, what makes it unique is the fact that we can do the same type of aeration except on much less horsepower. And the way we do that is, to get a good transfer, it's good to have your bubbles underneath and have plenty of time for them to travel up. The more time they got to travel, the more time they can transfer air. Same thing goes into effect with the ProFusion. So the ProFusion is unique in the fact that it has a port that you can hook to and put a flexible intake on it. This intake, in the ProFusion, is recommended to have a debris guard on it, which keeps out turtles, trash, weeds, that type of thing. Keeps it out of the pump for better and easier maintenance. So you can draw water, say this could be 7 feet deep, which there's a lot of pressure there. Doesn't matter to us because the water comes in, comes up, and all the oxygen transfer takes place at the surface. There's very little head pressure, so you use atmospheric oxygen, and that transfers the water. The way we do that is there's a two-blade process that's patented. The bottom blade is enclosed and it drives the water, and as it forces the water up, there's a second blade that basically slices the water, and as it slices the water, you get a micro bubble explosion behind the blade. It'd be the same thing as if you're in a pool or you take your hand through water and you kind of slice it down, you'll see a big bubble trailing behind your hand. Same thing, except for this is happening extremely fast on a fine blade, and that gives you that little bitty fine bubble, micro bubble explosion behind it. And then this water, once it comes up, it hits a deflector plate, comes down, and then it can be discharged however you want, horizontally, which gives it more travel time. You can discharge it down, which gives the bubbles more travel time. They fight up against the flow. This sphere being round, the water swirling inside, so the bubbles get a lot of contact inside the ball, inside the sphere. But you have all kinds of different options for discharging that water. But most importantly, you just want to draw that water from wherever you need it up to the surface, and it does not matter. You could draw water from a mile deep. It wouldn't make any difference to the top. As long as you're feeding 600 gallons a minute to it, the energy usage is the same. And so you can get a good transfer of oxygen using a surface aerator of this type. Other surface aerators that are on the market, a lot of times they're limited in the fact that they may put in air, but they don't mix very well. Or they may mix pretty well, but they don't put in a lot of air. This, we take care of both functions in one. We move a lot of water, we put a lot of bubbles. Sometimes with surface areas you'll see splash areas where they're throwing water into the air. It looks impressive, but doesn't really do a whole lot for oxygen transfer. Just by the fact that you're tumbling water through the atmosphere, you just don't get a lot of penetration of air into the water. So that's how the ProFusion works, and how you can draw from any depth to get the oxygen transfer on very little horsepower.